I will start there because nothing that follows makes sense without it. 40 years of humanity trying to earn a place at the galactic table, and the moment we finally arrived, the oldest civilization in the known universe laughed at us, not at our weapons, not at our ships, not at the 200-year gap between our first radio signal and our first faster-than-light drive, at our stories. I was standing in the Hall of Histories, aboard Conclave Station, Meridian, when it happened. The hall is the size of a small moon. I do not say that loosely. By measured volume, it is exactly that. A moon hollowed out, its interior lined with something that stores memory the way amber stores insects. Every species that has ever joined the conclave has their history archived here. The hall holds the death records of stars, the final transmissions of 12 extinct civilizations, the complete unbroken record of a universe that has been burning and collapsing and starting over since before our sun existed. I am Sergeant Maravas, UN Galactic Liaison Corps. I had spent 2 hours walking the hall's perimeter before the presentation started. I do not get nervous, I get operational, which looks the same from the outside but costs more on the inside. I had checked my credentials 4 times. I had reviewed the mythology submission package our cultural team had prepared. I had consumed 2 cups of something the station's nutrition system labeled coffee, and that was absolutely not coffee. Then the Veth archivists opened the file on Achilles. The sound they produced was a pipe organ being fed through something industrial. It ran for about 4 seconds. Subarchivist designation 7 null. Running the assessment, translated through the standard diplomatic node as charming. Ambassador Thistlein leaned close to me. That is the polished version, she said quietly. I said, what is the honest one? She considered, endearing in the way small animals are endearing when they attempt things beyond their capability. The file moved on to Samson, then Beowulf, then Hercules. I stood with my hands behind my back and my face perfectly still, which is what I do when I needed to do nothing. I watched the archivists move through 3,000 years of human mythology the way a geologist moves through rock layers, systematic, detached, mildly interested in what the composition reveals about the conditions that produced it. Then 7 null pulled up Joan of Arc. The historical record ran for 90 seconds. A 19-year-old girl, a nation in collapse, an army that had not won in a generation, and one person who looked at that situation and apparently decided it was her specific problem to fix. 7 null paused the file. Your species builds these stories around individuals who fail and die, it said. Why? The question hung in the air of the hall. And GT snorts. And GT around me, delegates from 43 civilizations waited. I opened my mouth. What came out was nothing, a full, complete, honest nothing. 7 null made a notation in the archive log. Ambassador Thistlein looked at me. Her expression was the diplomatic equivalent of a hand on the shoulder, which from Thistlein meant she was either sorry for me or cataloging me, usually both. The formal Veth assessment of human mythology, read aloud at the close of the presentation, was something I memorized because I read it enough times afterward that it became permanent. Emotionally immature civilizations consistently fabricate singular heroic agents to explain systemic events. This appears to function as psychological management of scale-related anxiety. Recommendation: continued observation as species matures. Fabricate, not imagine, not construct. Fabricate with the specific implication of manufacturing things that are not real because the real answer is too large to hold. I walked out of the hall and found a corridor that was empty and stood in it. The station recycled its air every 4 minutes. I could feel it move past me. Cool and faintly metallic, the breath of a system designed to keep living things alive indefinitely. I thought about Kepler Station. 4 seconds, then operational. I have been using that method for 6 years and it mostly holds. The thing was standing in that corridor, with the recycled air moving past me and the Hall of Histories at my back. I was not entirely sure the Veth were wrong. Kepler Station, I survived it, the only human who did, not because I was stronger or more determined than the 39 people who did not. I survived because of timing and geometry and one medication I found in a dead colleague's pocket. A sequence of accidents that happened to compound in my favor when they were compounding against everyone else. That was not a story that fit any of our mythological categories. I had never said that out loud. Nina Cole, my attaché, brought food to my quarters that evening. She set it down, looked at my face and said, "Tell me." They laughed at Achilles, I said. She sat down. Nina had grown up reading mythology like other people read sports records, with total commitment and real emotional stakes. She processed what I had said with visible effort. Like an actual laugh, she said. Pipe organ, I said, in a machine. She was quiet for a moment. Then what did you say back? Nothing, I said. She did not judge me for that. Sometimes nothing is the only honest answer, and she was 26 and already understood that. That night I lay awake and thought about Seven Null's question: why do your species build these stories around individuals who fail and die? I did not have an answer. What I had was the specific discomfort of someone who has been told with evidence that a thing they believed without examining might not survive examination. It is not a comfortable feeling. It is, I would later understand, an important one. I was still working through the mythology files at 400 when the Rift event notification came in. I read the Rift event brief 3 times. The first time, I read it for the data. The second time, I read it to check if I had misread the timeline. The third time, I read it because the second reading had confirmed the first, and I needed a moment to accept that. The Rift was a spatial anomaly in the Keth corridor, 11 sectors from Conclave Station Meridian. The term anomaly was doing a great deal of work in that notification. What the instrument readings actually described was a rift in real space, approximately 30 km wide. At its narrowest point, expanding at an accelerating rate and consuming everything it contacted at the quantum level. Not destroying, consuming. Taking matter apart at its most fundamental layer and incorporating it into its own expansion. It had eaten 3 star systems in 33 days. Nina was awake and at my door by 4:15. She had the same brief on her own reader. She looked at me. I looked at her. 11 days per system, she said. On average, I said. It is accelerating. By how much? Each consumption is 3.2% faster than the last. She stood very still. Nina is good at math. She did it in her head the way people do when the answer is going to be bad, and doing it in writing would make it feel too real. That compounds, she said. Yes, I said. We went to the emergency briefing together. The conclave's hall of response is a different space than the hall of histories, where the hall of histories is designed to impress with scale. The hall of response is designed to move information. Every surface is a display. Every seat is a terminal. It holds 200 delegates comfortably, and was when Nina and I arrived already at capacity. I found a position against the far wall and watched the VETH open the session. Their lead delegate, a senior archivist whose designation translated roughly to deep memory, presented the conclave's formal extinction response protocol. The protocol had been developed over many thousands of years by the collected expertise of 43 spacefaring civilizations. It was, deep memory explained, the most comprehensively tested emergency framework in galactic history. It had 17 stages. Stage 1 was assessment, duration approximately 4 years. I did the math. I did it again. I looked at Nina. She was already looking at me. Stage 1 alone would take 4 years. Rift was currently consuming 1 star system every 11 days and accelerating. By any calculation I could run in my head, Stage 1 would not be complete before the rift reached populated space. I raised my hand. This is not, I have been told how the conclave operates. You submit a formal request for recognition, which is processed and scheduled. You do not raise your hand like a student who has noticed the classroom is on fire. Deep memory paused. The Sergeant Voss of the human delegation, it said, this is how the VETH address people, species first, title second, name last, which always makes me feel like I am being filed. I said the Stage 1 assessment period is 4 years. The rift is currently consuming a star system every 11 days, and the interval is decreasing. By the time Stage 1 is complete, the rift will have consumed approximately 130 more systems. Several of those are populated. Deep memory regarded me with an expression I could not read, because the VETH do not express things in ways human faces can parse. There was a pause that lasted approximately 7 seconds, which in VETH communication is either thoughtful consideration or profound offense. The protocol accounts for uncertainty. Ranges, deep memory said, premature action produces errors. With respect, I said carefully, because when I say with respect, it is a container I fill with everything I actually mean. Errors on a 4-year timeline look different from errors on an 11-day timeline. The session moved on. I was not asked to speak again, but in the corridor afterward, a delegate I had not spoken to directly stepped into my path. The Keth. Their species is distinct visually, with 6 secondary eyes arranged in a semicircle below the primary 2, a silhouette that reads as tall and very still. This one watched me with all 8 eyes and said nothing for a moment. Then you calculated correctly, it said. Its name in the translation the conclave assigned was Vessel of Long Memory, which I would later learn was the Keth equivalent of a family name. That meant exactly what it said. The conclave's protocol was designed for threats that move on geological timelines, vessel of long memory said. This one does not. Have you raised that formally? I asked. I have been raising it for 9 days. Vessel of long memory said, I am the only Keth delegate at this conclave. The Keth have no home system, we lost it. We know what it looks like when something moves faster than the process designed to stop it. I held that sentence for a long moment. I am going to send this data to Earth. I said. What will Earth do with it, vessel of long memory asked, not dismissively. Genuinely. I do not know yet, I said. I sent the data at 1100, flagged urgent, which in UN galactic liaison terms means someone reads it within the hour, instead of routing it through 3 departments across 2 weeks. Earth responded in 6 hours. Callum Price, my contact at the liaison office in Geneva, sent a 2-line reply. We see it, tell us what you need. I sat with that message for longer than it deserved on the surface. It was 2 lines, practical, no committee, no 17 stages, no assessment period. Tell us what you need. I did not know then why that made me feel something I had not felt standing in the Hall of Histories with nothing to say. I know now, but I am getting there. What I also noticed and filed, because filing things is what I do when I do not yet know what to do with them, was something in the raw rift data I had been running through my own terminal. The acceleration rate was not random. Each interval was exactly 3.2% shorter than the previous one, not approximately exactly. The rift was not expanding chaotically. It was learning. I had to explain Earth's response to 43 civilizations, and I will be honest with you, I rehearsed it 4 times and it did not get better with practice. Earth's formal response to the rift event arrived 9 days after my initial report. I had spent those 9 days attending conclave sessions, filing updates and trying to read vessel of long memory's expression when the protocol's slow pace was discussed, which was every day, and in terms of increasing urgency that the senior delegates continued to meet with the patience of people who have several 100 years of life left and do not feel time the way the rest of us do. I was standing at the delegate briefing terminal when the Earth response came through on my personal channel. 1 ship, 1 modified civilian research vessel, registered to the UN Science Division. 1 crew of 6, arrival time 4 days. I read the manifest 3 times, then I opened the file attached to the lead researcher's name, Owen Grant. The file was classified at a level I technically had access to, but had never needed before. It took 4 separate credential confirmations to open. When I finally reached the first notation at the top of his record, it stopped me cold. Heritage asset. I did not know what that meant. I read the rest of the file to find out. Owen Grant, 31 years old, born in Newcastle, England. Mother was a materials engineer. Father ran a small boat repair business on the coast. Owen had failed his first pilot certification exam by 11 points, passed his second one by 4. He had spent the following 11 years working in deep space materials research, running extinction scenario simulations in his off hours as a personal project, the way other people run distance races or learn instruments. For 11 years on his own time he had been practicing for problems like the rift. The heritage asset designation was not a Military classification. I searched the UN Galactic Liaison internal database and found it filed under anthropological research, cross-referenced with behavioral data, collected from human crisis response, events over the last 40 years. The definition read, designation applied to individuals, demonstrating mythology consistent, behavioral profiles in non-simulated, extinction-adjacent scenarios, characterized by willingness to sustain, personal risk at levels statistically inconsistent with self-preservation, instinct in pursuit of low probability, systemic benefit. I read that 3 times. Mythology consistent. The vet had spent a full session in the Hall of Histories explaining that human mythology was fabricated, that we invented singular heroic agents because we could not handle the real scale of events. And here was a UN classification that said, no, we are not inventing them. We are noticing them, writing them down, filing them for reference. I closed the document, sat still for about 30 seconds. Then I went to the conclave session room to inform 43 civilizations that Earth was sending 1 man and a research vessel to handle an anomaly that had consumed 3 star systems. Ambassador Thaisolin was waiting in the corridor outside. She had clearly already seen the Earth response. Her expression, which was usually impeccably diplomatic, had something careful around the edges. The human delegation has received Earth's response, she said. Correct, I said. And the response is 1 vessel. 1 vessel, I said. With 6 crew members. 6. She was quiet for a moment. Then how would you like me to frame this to the senior delegates? I appreciated that she was offering. I did not accept. I will frame it myself, I said. I walked into the session room and stood at the briefing position and looked at 43 civilizations and said, Earth has reviewed the rift data. Earth has sent its response. The response arrives in 4 days. Deep memory said, the fleet configuration. 1 vessel, I said. Silence. I want to be precise about what happened in that silence because I have replayed it many times. It was not shock. Shock implies the outcome had seemed possible before being proven otherwise. What settled over that room was something closer to confirmation, a thing they had quietly expected from the moment humanity arrived at the conclave, being proven publicly with documentation. A delegate from the Suvi collective, civilization that had been spacefaring for 6,000 years, said softly to its neighbor, charming. Same word the Veth had used about Achilles. I stood at the briefing terminal and did not move. There was a sound to my left. Vessel of long memory stood and addressed the room directly, which was also not conclave protocol and which did not stop it. The human delegation has submitted response, it said. The response will be evaluated on its outcome, not its scale. I suggest we proceed. The session moved on. In the corridor afterward, vessel of long memory fell into step beside me. Without invitation, we walked for a moment without speaking. Thank you, I finally said. The Kaith do not evaluate effort by the size of what is sent, it said. We evaluate it by what the sender was willing to give. I did not answer. I was thinking about Owen Grant, 31 years old, from Newcastle, with 11 years of practicing for exactly this. The ship arrived in 3 days, not 4. It was called the Wren. A civilian vessel mid-range with modifications along the sensor and propulsion lines that suggested it had been retrofitted for deep space anomaly work. It docked at the station's lower port, the section designed for smaller, independent vessels, not exactly where anyone expected an extinction response team to park. I met Owen Grant at the airlock. He was not what I had assembled in my imagination. I had built someone who looked like the kind of person you write mythology about, which was apparently a bias I was still carrying even after everything. Owen Grant was average height with the particular quality of stillness that people develop after years of working alone in deep space, where economy of motion becomes instinctive. He had dark circles under his eyes. His handshake was firm but brief. "Sergeant Voss," he said, "I have been reading your data packets on the way in. You noticed the 3.2% pattern 8 days ago," I said. "I noticed it 9 days ago before Earth forwarded your report. I had already started the model." He said it without ego, just information in place between us. "What does the model show?" I said. He turned to the small terminal on the wall of the airlock corridor and pulled up a display I had not seen before. His projections ran 3 times further out than anything the Conclave had produced, and they were not built from the Conclave's base assumptions. He had started from the acceleration data and worked backward, which meant his projections were not estimated from the rift's current behavior. They were estimated from the rift's intended behavior. "It is not random," I said. "No," he said. "It is building towards something." "Yes," he said. "I think I know what. And I think there is a window, 14 days. Maybe 15. After that, the frequency pattern locks and there is no point of entry." I looked at him. He looked back at me. "You came to go in," I said. "That is why I came," he said. I did not ask if he understood what that meant. He had read enough about the rift to know he was not here because he had been ordered. The Snort's file had said voluntary assignment, which in UN bureaucratic language means exactly what it says. He had asked to come. I thought about 7 Null's notation in the Hall of Histories. I thought about the heritage asset classification and its careful, bloodless language, mythology-consistent behavioral profiles. I thought about Joan of Arc. The Conclave is going to resist this, I said. "I know," he said. "I will handle the Conclave," I said. He nodded. He seemed neither grateful nor relieved, just ready, like a person who has made a decision that's settled into place so cleanly there was nothing left to deliberate. I walked him to the guest quarters and then went to find deep memory. That conversation took 90 minutes. What I will say is that deep memory, to its credit, reviewed Owen's model in complete silence and with full attention. When it finished, it looked at me and said, "The projection methodology is not one the Conclave scientific division has used." "No," I said, "because it requires a different set of starting assumptions," it said. "Yes," I said. Deep memory was quiet. "What starting assumptions does it use?" I thought about how to answer that. "Honestly, it assumes," I said, "that someone is going in. I want to tell you that the 14 days leading to Owen's entry into the rift were clean and organized, and that every piece moved into place with the precision of a plan executed by competent people. That would be a different story. What actually happened was a sustained, an exhausting argument that ran across every diplomatic channel I had access to, and several I technically did not. The Conclave's scientific division ran Owen's model 14 times and confirmed it was accurate, and then spent 6 days arguing about whether accuracy was sufficient justification for what he was proposing. 3 senior delegates formally requested that Earth send something larger, which Earth answered by explaining that nothing larger would fit the entry window Owen's model had identified. The VETH submitted a philosophical objection. I'm not using that term loosely. An actual philosophical objection, formally filed, questioning whether intentional engagement with an extinction-level event by a single individual was ethically coherent. I read that document twice and then went to find Nina, who made me sit down and eat something real before she would let me respond to it. They are worried about him, Nina said. They are worried about the methodology, I said. Which is the VETH way of being worried about him, she said. I sat with that. During those 14 days, Owen worked. He was at his terminal in the Wren's research bay for an average of 16 hours a day, refining the resonance model, recalculating the entry vectors, checking and rechecking the frequency window. I visited twice. Both times he was deep in the work, and conversation was brief, which I understood. When someone is building the thing that might save everything, you do not pull them out of it to ask how they are feeling. On day 12, Vessel of long memory came to find me. We walked the upper observation corridor, which runs along the station's outer hull and gives a full view of the star field beyond. The Caith move with a deliberateness that takes getting used to, each step placed like the floor deserves consideration. Vessel of long memory walked beside me for a while without speaking, which I had learned was its way of beginning rather than pausing. My civilization lost our star system 412 years ago, it said. The event that caused it lasted 9 days. The Conclave's response arrived on day 14. I kept walking. I let that breathe. We have been in the archive files of every extinction event the Conclave has documented since we joined, it said. In most of them, there is a point where the response should have been faster and was not, where the process moved at the speed of process and the event moved at the speed of events. Yes, I said. In those files there is sometimes a notation, it said. An individual, one organism who moved outside the process, who did not wait for the assessment period. The notation usually describes the action as anomalous. I looked at it. Your species has more of those notations than any other civilization. The archive, it said. I did not know what to say. I had not known that. 7 Null's assessment called it fabrication. Vessel of long memory said, I read those same stories and I read them as records. Your species was not making up heroes. Your species was writing down every time one person moved faster than the process and making sure it would not be forgotten. We reached the end of the observation corridor and stood looking out at the dark. I was the only survivor of Kepler station, I said. I had not told anyone on the station this. I have never understood why I survived and the others did not. I have been carrying the idea that it was an accident, that there was no reason for it. Perhaps the reason, vessel of long memory said, is that you are here now, holding the conclave's process open long enough for Owen Grant to do what he came to do. I thought about that for a long time. Day 14 arrived. Owen's entry window opened at 600. Station time. The Wren departed at 5:47. I was in the monitoring station at 500. Along with Nina, vessel of long memory, deep memory, Ambassador Thistleton, and delegates from 7 other civilizations who had chosen to be present. The displays were running full sensor coverage of the Kaith corridor. I had brought coffee, real coffee, from the small supply I kept for occasions that needed something honest. I watched the Wren move toward the rift on the main display. The rift looked, and I have tried to describe this accurately several times, and not yet fully succeeded. It looked like the universe had started to come apart along a seam, a long diagonal separation in the visible fabric of space, with no light coming from beyond it and no reflection on its surface, just an absolute absence that somehow managed to be more present than everything around it. It did not make a sound. Our instruments confirmed silence at every frequency. That absence of sound was worse than any noise it could have made. I held my coffee and watched. Owen's voice came through the comm channel as the Wren reached approach. Distance clear, steady. He ran through his checklist the way a person reads a grocery list, routine and focused. Nothing in his voice that suggested he was about to cross into a thing that had consumed 3 star systems. Resonance array is calibrated, he said. Entry vector confirmed. Frequency window is open, entering in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. I drank my coffee. Sergeant Voss, he said. Grant. The model is good, he said. I have checked it enough times to be confident in it. I know, I said. If the window closes early, he said, it will close fast within about 40 seconds. If that happens, the crew has orders to exit immediately. He said the crew. Not he, just the crew. Owen, I said, which was the first time I had used his first name. Yes. I did not finish it in any way that would have fit in a mythology file. I said, come back. A pause. Working on it, he said. The Wren entered the rift at 6:03. The monitoring station went silent, the way that 8 intelligent species being deliberately quiet is still the loudest kind of silence. Every display was live. Deep memory stood behind its terminal, and for the first time since I had arrived at the conclave, it was not operating at the practice distance of an archivist. It was watching the way anyone watches something that matters. 3 minutes in, the Wren's sensor feeds were still transmitting. Owen's voice came through steady at regular intervals, confirming readings, adjusting frequency. 5 minutes in, the resonance cascade began on the external displays. Something was happening to the rift's edge. The expansion rate, which had been ticking upward at its precise 3.2%, was fluctuating, not stopping, but fluctuating, which was new. Nina's hand found my arm. I let it stay there. 7 minutes. Frequency is holding, Owen's voice said. The rift interior is more active than the model projected. I am compensating. Manually. The resonance array was designed to be held at frequency by automated systems. Manual meant Owen personally sustaining the output through direct operation. How long can you hold it manually? said into the calm. A beat, as long as it takes, he said. 8 minutes. The rift's expansion had stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Every display in the monitoring station confirmed it simultaneously, and the silence in the room turned into something else. Not celebration. Something more careful than that. The stillness of people who have been watching something fall and are not yet sure it has landed. 9 minutes 10. It is working, Owen said. There was no triumph in it, just information. I see it, I said. The consumption pattern is inverting, he said. I need 3 more minutes at this frequency and then I can release. 3 minutes. I became aware of my coffee. It had gone completely cold while I was watching the displays. I noticed this with the specific focus of a person whose brain needs somewhere to put attention it cannot spend on the thing it cannot control. I focused on the cold coffee, the weight of the cup, the fact that I had been gripping it for the last 10 minutes with enough force to leave marks on the ceramic. 11 minutes. The rift's outer edge began to contract. Slowly at first, then not slowly. The seam in the universe pulled inward. The absence that had been consuming star systems folding back on itself with the same mathematical precision that had driven its expansion, except now running in reverse. On the display, the Ren signal held steady inside it. 12 minutes. Releasing, Owen said. The rift collapsed over the next 40 seconds in complete silence on every monitored frequency, a total absence of sound that somehow read at the end as something like a final breath. The Ren exited at minute 13. Damaged, 1 engine offline, hull breach. In 2 sections, contained but real. The ship came out of where the rift had been and sat in open space with its running light steady and its comm channel live. And Owen's voice saying calmly, Ren is clear, all crew accounted for. I put my cold coffee down on the terminal surface. The Kaith corridor where 3-star systems had been consumed and 4 more had been weeks away from the same fate, showed nothing at the coordinates where the rift had been. No anomaly, no edge, no absence, just space, dark and ordinary and present. Deep memory behind its terminal was very still. Then it opened its archive log. It pulled up the file on human mythology, the one with 7 nulls. Original assessment, the one that used the word fabricate. I watched it add a notation. I was not close enough to read what it wrote. I looked at vessel of long memory. It had all 8 eyes on the display. Where the rift had been, it was not moving. It was doing the thing the Kaith do when they are holding something that belongs to very old and very particular category of memory. Nina was still holding my arm. I realized I had been holding her hand back for some time. Owen's ship limped into docking at 7:48. I was waiting at the airlock. He came through looking like a person who had just done something the universe had not intended to make easy. Dark circles deeper than when he arrived. Small cut along his jaw from where something had broken loose in the rifts. Interior. His uniform had a long scorch mark along the left sleeve from an electrical discharge. He saw me waiting and stopped. The model held, he said. I know, I said. I watched. He nodded. He seemed in the way of people who have been carrying a very large weight for a very long time, slightly at a loss for what to do now that it had been set down. Coffee, I said. Real coffee, not station coffee. He said, I have been thinking about Coffee for the last 9 minutes. The conclave takes time to process things. This is not a criticism. When you are an institution spanning 43 civilizations with histories measured in millennia, your pace of processing reflects the pace of surviving that long. Things move at the speed of things that are meant to last. I understood this intellectually. It did not make the weeks after the rift event feel any faster. Owen and his crew were formally received by the conclave on day 3 post-event. The session was brief by conclave standards, which still ran 4 hours. He stood at the briefing position I had occupied many times and answered questions about the resonance model in the measured, accurate way of someone explaining work they have already internalized completely. The Suvi Collective's delegate, the one who had said charming at my announcement of one ship, submitted 12 technical questions and received 12 complete answers and did not use the word charming again. I watched from my usual position along the wall. Nina was beside me. At some point during the session, she leaned over and said, "They are not laughing." I said no. She said, "I think they are trying to figure out what category to put it in." I think that is exactly what they are doing, I said. The Veith were the last to question Owen. Deep Memory presented the technical question. 7 Null, the sub-archivist, who had made the original mythology assessment, attended and sat through the entire session without asking anything. At the end, when the session was formally closed, it remained at its position while the other delegates filed out. I stayed as well. 7 Null addressed Owen directly. "In your 11 years of extinction scenario simulation," it said, "were the outcomes of your models generally positive or generally negative?" Owen considered. "Mostly negative," he said. "That is the statistical reality of extinction-level events. The scenarios where one actor changes the outcome are rare." "But you modeled them," 7 Null said. "Yes," he said. "Why model scenarios that are statistically improbable?" Owen was quiet for a moment. It was not a stumped quiet, it was a careful one. "Because improbable is not impossible," he said, "and if you have not already built the model, you cannot run it when the situation arrives." 7 Null made a notation. I watched it do this and thought about the first notation it had made in the Hall of Histories when it asked why we build stories about people who fail and die. I thought about the answer I had not been able to give. I was beginning to understand what the answer was. I had been assembling it piece by piece across the last several weeks without quite seeing the shape. Until now, Owen was organizing his research materials the following morning when I went to find him. The Wren was in dock for repairs and would not be cleared to travel for another week. His quarters had the organized density of a person who is always prepared to move quickly, everything in its place, nothing unnecessary. I knocked on the open door. He looked up. "I want to show you something," I said. "If you have time." He had time. I took him to the Hall of Histories. It was early station morning, which meant the hall was nearly empty. Our footsteps in that enormous space made the particular sound of small things inside large structures. I led him to the human mythology section, which occupied a respectably sized portion of archive for a civilization that had only joined the conclave 2 generations ago. I found the file I was looking for and pulled it up. The Veth's original assessment of human mythology, 7 nulls notations from the presentation, the word fabricate, and at the bottom, added some time in the last 2 weeks, 3 new notations. 7 null had been back. Owen read them. The first said, revised assessment of mythological function pending further data. The second said, individual actor. Models in human historical records show pattern of non-random occurrence. Methodology for identifying precursor. Conditions unknown. Recommend expanded research. The third was shorter than the others. Query, if the stories are records, what are they recording? Owen stood very still. I said they are not laughing anymore. He did not answer immediately. He read the notations again. Then he looked at the broader human mythology archive. Around us, the hundreds of files, the centuries of names and stories, and records that the Veth had been so certain were fabrications. You know what I think they are. Recording, he said. Tell me, I said. Not the heroes, he said, the people who saw them. Someone had to be there. Someone had to understand what happened well enough to write it down, and then someone else had to read it somewhere later and think that can be done, that specific thing that seems impossible. It has been done. Here is the record of it. I thought about Nina, 26 years old, who had grown up reading mythology the way other people read sports records, with total commitment and real emotional stakes, who had come to my door at 4:15 in the morning because she had been reading the Rift data too. I thought about vessel of long memory. 412 years after its civilization's home system was consumed, still in the archive of every extinction event, still watching for the moment when the response was slow and one person moved faster. I thought about Callum Price in Geneva. 2 lines, no committees, tell us what you need. The machinery of it was not mysterious. I realized it had never been mysterious. We build the story. The story stays. Someone reads it. That someone becomes the next entry. We are not fabricating heroes. We are engineering the conditions for them to appear. I want to show you one more thing, I said. We walked deeper into the archive. It took 15 minutes to find what I was looking for, because the conclave's cataloging system is not designed for human intuitive navigation, and I had to ask 3 times before a station archivist pointed me in the right direction. The Kepler station file, filed under Human Incident Records, dated 6 years ago, 4 pages of data. Summary and casualty report, the Veth. Notation at the bottom was brief, Veth. Archive notations always are. Incident catastrophic station failure. Class 3 event, casualties 39. Confirmed survivors 1, notation. Single human survivor mechanism of survival unclear. Owen read it, then he looked at me. I had not told him. I had not told most people on the station. I watched him put it together anyway, because he was the kind of person who had spent 11 years building models from incomplete data, which means he was very good at working backward from conclusions to the conditions that produced them. You, he said. Me, I said. Mechanism unclear, he said. That is what I always thought too, I said. Accident timing, a sequence of things that compounded in my favor. I have been carrying the idea for 6 years that survival without a reason is the same as survival that does not count. And now, I thought about what vessel of long memory had said in the observation corridor about the reason for survival being what you do with the time it gives you, about holding the process open long enough for someone else to do what they came to do. I do not think I survived Kepler station because of some grand design. I said I think I survived because of timing and geometry and one medication in a pocket, which is true. But I spent 6 years treating that accident as evidence that survival meant nothing, that there was no point to it. And now, he said again, now I think the point does not always arrive before the survival does. I said, sometimes it arrives 6 years later in a diplomatic posting you took because there was nothing else, standing in a corridor arguing with a 17-stay protocol because the numbers did not add up. He was quiet for a moment. You held the entire conclave's process open for 14 days on the strength of a 2-line message from Geneva and a classified file about a man who failed his first pilot exam, he said. Yes, I said. Without that, he said. The window closes, I said. The model does not get a chance to run. He nodded slowly, the way Owen Grant accepted things thoroughly and without waste. I went back to the Kepler station file and opened the notation field. He watched. I thought about what to write. I thought about 7 Null's question, the one I had not been able to answer in the hall all those weeks ago. Why do your species build these stories around individuals who fail and die? I thought about the answer that had taken me 6 years and 1 extinction event and a 31-year-old researcher from Newcastle to assemble. I typed 2 words. I closed the archive. Owen did not ask what I had written. He looked at my face and I looked at his. And that was enough. 3 months after the Rift event, the conclave issued its formal revised assessment of human mythology. Deep Memory read it aloud in the Hall of Histories to a full audience of 43 delegations. I was standing in my usual position along the wall. Nina was beside me. Vessel of long memory stood near the front. Revised classification of human heroic mythology, Deep Memory read. Not fabrication of individual agency. Documentation of recurring behavioral phenotype, human populations under extinction-adjacent conditions. Demonstrate statistically anomalous production of individuals willing to sustain personal risk at levels inconsistent with self-preservation, instinct in pursuit of low probability, systemic benefit, mechanism for producing this phenotype under active research, mythological archive function, accurate record keeping, recommendation expanded, access for all conclave member civilizations. The hall was silent. Then from near the front, a sound I had not heard before from the Keth, low and resonant, moving through the chest before it reached the ears. Vessel of long memory, standing at full height, making the sound its species makes when something long lost is finally found. Other delegations took it up, each in their own register. The sounds layered and built in that enormous space in the hall that holds the records of everything that has ever mattered, until the Hall of Histories was filled with the particular noise of 43 civilizations revising something had been very certain of. I did not make any noise. I stood at the wall and felt Nina's hand on my arm and thought clearly and without drama that 39 people on Kepler station had been Gone for 6 years, and I had never known why I was still here. I knew now. Not because the universe had a plan, not because survival is a reward for being the right kind of person, but because every person in that chain, Nina reading Mythology at 400, Callum Price in Geneva, with his 2 lines and no committees, vessel of long memory pressing the conclave for 9 days before I even arrived, Owen Grant failing one exam and passing the next and spending 11 years in quiet preparation. Every one of them was carrying a piece of this. None of them were waiting for permission to move. That is the mechanism. That is what the archive records. Not the hero at the center, the network around the hero that made it possible. Every person who ever read one of those old stories and thought, that can be done. Owen received his formal commendation in a small ceremony 3 days before his crew departed. He stood at the front of the room looking like a person who was relieved to have his work confirmed and ready to return to it. He gave a short statement about the resonance model and the value of long-term scenario preparation, and then looked like he wished he had prepared fewer remarks. Afterward, I found him near the docking bay with a coffee. He said, I read the Kepler station file again. I said, I know. He said, the 2 words you added to the notation. I said, yes. He was quiet for a moment. Not an accident, was it, writing that there? No, I said. He nodded. He drank his coffee. He looked out at the stars through the docking bay viewport, the stars that were still there because of 11 years of voluntary preparation and a 14-day window and 1 ship. I almost did not put my name in for this assignment, he said. I know, I said. How, he said. I thought about the mythology files, about Joan at 19, deciding it was her problem, specifically about the long chain of people who almost did not and then did and then got written down so the next one would know it was possible. Because the ones who almost did not, I said, are the only ones who ever do. He considered that, accepted it in the way Owen Grant accepted things, fully and without anything left over. He left the next morning. The Wren cleared the docking bay at 600, running light steady, 1 engine still slightly rough from the repairs, moving out into the open dark toward whatever came next. I watched it go from the observation corridor. Then I went back to the Hall of Histories, to the Kepler station file, and looked at what I had written one more time. 2 words and a notation field in the largest archive in the galaxy, in a hall the size of a small moon, surrounded by the records of everything that had ever mattered to anyone. Not for me, for whoever would read it. Next, the next person carrying a sequence of accidents and wondering if survival without a clear reason was worth anything, the next person who would need to know that yes, it was. That the reason does not always come before the survival. That's sometimes the whole point of making it through, is simply so you are there 6 years later when the numbers do not add up and someone needs a human being who will raise their hand in a room full of people who have stopped bothering to 2 words. I closed the file. I went to find Nina. She was already awake, already working, already moving at the speed the situation required, which was the only speed she knew. We had a lot to do.